welcome. Today I'm speaking with Allard and Paulwyn of Medoo, co-founders of Medoo, an incredible coaching software. And we're holding space today to talk about the really important topic, particularly in 2023, of technology and personal growth, and building technology to enhance the capacity for personal growth, not productivity. This is a topic that's close to my heart because I think we have in our society quite a strong fixation on this notion of productivity and almost in an extractive, potentially exploitative way. And to some extent, technology can contribute to this. So Paulwyn and Allard are really interested in this potential for technology to actually enhance our capacity for personal growth. And I would imagine, as a consequence of that, our humanity and our interconnectedness. But I'm curious to hear what they have to say. Welcome, Paulwyn and Allard.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Sally. Excited to be here. First conversation of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Exciting 2023. So I'd like to start by sort of understanding a little bit about each of your relationship with technology. You've both played around with or worked in technology for most of your lives. So I can imagine that this is sort of, really shaped a strong relationship with computer technology. I'm curious to know, what is the main way that tech has improved your life? And maybe if you have an example of when it's actually damaged your life. And if you have specific examples, that would be great. And I'll throw to Paulwyn to start, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. I guess first, Happy New Year to everyone. I think, like you said, been part, or technology has been part of my life from a very early stage, and there's been many ways that it's improved my life. But a couple of things that really stand out is that sense of wonder as I was growing up, being able to see how technology was changing our lives and being more and more incorporated into our lives. I still remember writing letters to my grandparents as a child, and then having phones, and then having mobile phones, and the feeling of writing the first email that got sent, and you know that it's instantly received. That was just magic. So that sense of wonder has been great, I think. And also, I love building things. I've always loved building things. So working with software technology where you can build things so quickly, see them come to life so quickly, and then see the value that it brings to people all within a very short period of time has also been super incredible. And I've loved those aspects of it. But there is, as things have grown, and over the last 20 years, there's so much noise. Sometimes it is overwhelming, the amount of noise that's out there created by tech. And I feel that it's great that it's made our world smaller. We feel more connected than ever before. Things don't feel as far away or as distant. The knowledge is at your fingertips all the time. That's all incredible, but it hasn't necessarily brought us closer together. It does create polarization and extremes, and then it's harder to kind of come back and have conversations that are productive. So I dislike that, and I think that's part of the damage that's been inflicted, not just in my life, but more broadly as well. And then I think good intentions haven't necessarily translated to good outcomes. The technology has amplified abusive behavior, for example, both at individual levels as well as from companies. And I think that's a shame, because quite a lot of it started with good intentions, and then you see how it evolves into something that has quite a harmful outcome on people's lives. And so I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful answer. And I really like how you've highlighted that difference between sort of intentions and outcome, and that can be quite different. And then I think also it's interesting to think about the scope to maybe see where we can align the outcomes more completely with those good intentions that we often start things with. So thank you. Allard, tell me a little about the pros and cons, the good and bad of your relationship with technology.
Yeah. Well, I guess first off, like similar to Paulwyn, I grew up with I guess the evolution of the internet into the world, and I my relationship with technology kind of goes hand in hand with that as well. And so I guess one of the main ways that it's improved my life, first of all, is that very plainly it's given me a career. Like I think that it's a great and exciting place to be in, I guess, the innovative part of technology. And for me personally, I associate that a lot with computers, and I know technology is much broader than that, but to me, it always has this vibe of computers and the internet. And I think the first thing that I got in touch with really was the act of expressing myself through drawing on a computer. So I remember when I was a kid, my mom really pushed my dad to get a computer so that she could have a word processor and write things and print things out. And that didn't interest me at all. But I got a hold of the computer, and through, I think, a friend of my dad, got some games and some software on like floppy disks, and then booted all that up, and then had, I believe, what was MS Paint, but I'm not even sure I remember anymore. And I spent hours just drawing on MS Paint on like a DOS computer, like no Windows, it was pre-Windows. Yeah, so that was like that the ability to create something and then print it out and then multiply it, I thought like was really, really fascinating. And so that of course all like exploded with the internet. And so I think my relationship is that I think it's amazing to have all that there at your fingertips. Like it's not just an encyclopedia, it's a free university, right? Like everything is there. What I think is damaging for me personally is I have a very mixed relationship with social media. I love the fact that you can instantly reach anybody all over the world, and that like gives you the ability to stay in touch really well. But I personally like have a lot of bad vibes around FOMO and like yeah, and I guess like the negative feelings of endless scrolling through feeds, and I guess, you know, starting to feel insecure by all the amazing things that other people are doing, and that kind of stuff. And that leads to, I guess, the second damaging thing that I have, which is that binging effect, and the addictiveness of the stuff that has been built. Not just Netflix binging, but, you know, all of the social media binging, or even just like going down a rabbit hole because you think something is interesting, and then before you know it, you're like 10 YouTube videos deep into some other topic that is completely unrelated to what you were looking for in the first place. And that really has pressed on me that, you know, you have to be active in setting your own self boundaries to be able to curb that behavior. And that's really on you, because the rest of the world isn't going to do it for you, kind of thing. So you have to like really kind of be on top of that, yeah, to manage the technology for yourself.
Great points, Allard. And I think that's such a great observation as well, that we really need to be, I think it's so easy to shift from mindful into mindless sort of consumption of social media, and sort of being quite strict with ourselves, and almost, you know, being very intentional about how we literally, you know, click on the phone and open the app and make that decision to do that, knowing that it's a very powerful, you know, force almost that can overwhelm the best of intentions. It's a great answers. Thank you so much to you both. The next question I'd like to ask is a little bit of a sort of a proposal I'd like to hear your thoughts on. Paul, I'll start with you. Are the terms human and technology contradictory?
I think that's a great question. Sometimes it feels that way, doesn't it? That they are contradictory. But I don't think it needs to be that way. I think it's possible to build tech that augments us, takes us to new levels, opens up new possibilities for us. We could think of tech tools as powerful partners instead of looking at it as one or the other. We could look at tech tools as powerful partners in helping us to flourish. And there are some good examples of that. You know, can you imagine going through a pandemic like COVID without tech that still allowed us to stay in touch to some extent? Maybe, you know, we didn't have the same level of connection, but we were able to do quite a lot still while going through a pandemic and isolating at home and things like that. So I try to look at it in that way of how can tech help us augment our lives, make things better for us, instead of looking at it as a force that is changing the world for the worse. As much as we see quite a lot of that happening as well, I try to keep that positive mind and see the powerful power of tech in a way that is good, rather than in a way that is, oh, it's taking our jobs away, it's creating more mental health issues, it's doing XYZ. I want to look at it more as a force that augments our lives and augments things for us, and ultimately helps us get more out of life. Yeah, I'm keen to hear what Allard thinks as well on this.
Yeah, me too. I would love to just know that I think what I love there is, there is such a body of evidence of the sort of the negative impact, but it's so empowering to be able to say this. Just because there is that body of evidence, that doesn't mean that's how we have to define technology and simply write it off in that way. There is scope, and there is also plenty of evidence of the positive connective impact that it can have. So thank you for highlighting that, the paradox there. Allard, yes.
Yes, I think you use a very fitting word there to define. Like, I feel like these concepts, like that, they both human and technology, they just they exist anyway, regardless of what's going on, and it really just matters like what you focus on and what you put energy to help build, whether or not it's good or bad, whatever that means to you. And in a similar vein to Paul, and I really see technology as tools and as extension of human behavior, which means that its intention is to augment human behavior, to extend it, and not to replace it. And so the way that I kind of think of it is like humans have been inventing tools since day one to do things, right? A rock is a tool to break open a nut, and a hammer is a tool to drive a nail into the wall. And fast forward, a computer and the software that it has is a massive system to control all the robots that are drilling all the holes and putting the cars together, right? And that's still just a tool in that sense. And so the more that the device or the software or the technology is in service of the task that a human is trying to do, the more human essentially like that technology could be and is, hopefully. I think where it gets problematic is that we also use technology for a lot of frivolous things, I guess, and the frivolous and distracting things can be fun, but can also not always be helpful. But at the same time, we're also actually like using the technology, the power of it, to exploit some of our weaknesses on purpose. And that I think is like actually a human behavior where the technology has actually become overhuman, in that it's like almost like evil human. The technology itself doesn't do that. It's the human intent behind it that makes it do that. And so, yeah, I guess that's where I think we really need to think about, are we placing this technology and this action in service of a human task, or are we placing it in service of a business task or some kind of other political agenda or something like that? And then that's what makes the technology inhuman, in my mind.
Amazing. I think really a lot of interesting ideas and concepts here. It almost feels like there's sort of multiple levels that we're looking at when we're thinking about humanity and technology. And I think I love that you both use these words, sort of augment and detract. Like, is it an extension? Does it augment the experience of being a human being and humanity as a whole, or is it actually undermining us? Is it actually having a negative impact? And I think and we won't delve too deep into this, but it's interesting when we start to also then contemplate in the terms of good or bad, positive or negative, because that is there's some moral, issues going on there that are really, I think, very, very important in this space to be contemplating. And imagine with your work that's something you both very consciously do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something we tend to forget, we can talk a little bit more about this in the next few topics that we cover as well, but I think what we often forget is how tools, whether it is computer tech or other tools, they can or they can amplify rather both the negative and positive aspects of being human. I think there was one example that really sticks to my mind where there was an early version of a chat tool that had been the data that they had used to teach it how to chat was from social media. And so they'd taken all this data from social media, they'd fed it to this natural language processing algorithm. And it turned out that it was very racist, it was very sexist. And it was, when you started using it as a chat tool, it was spewing out all this hate. And that like really made me think, it's just a tool. It's not necessarily even built with any specific intention. It's just a tool to try something. And the data that has been given to it, it has been created by humans, and that's the outcome that we saw from it. I thought that example really shows how tools can amplify the negativity that's in us as well. And we need to be conscious of that as we create more and more powerful tools.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned powerful tools there as well, because the thought came to mind of like, well, for example, a knife can be used to cut something so that we can eat together, or it can be used to damage, the planet or each other. But that's quite a simple tool, of course. When we're talking about technology, it is wildly complex beyond way beyond my capacity to understand, and only becoming more complex. So I think it's almost extra important that we are aware of the complexity of it, and not letting that daunt us in our willingness to look at it and to examine it and think about the moral implications and our responsibility in those terms, and not just sort of go, oh, it's too complicated, so I won't think about it, but to be able to hold, that complexity, but also say, and we have a responsibility here to use this complex tool in a humane way. I'm loving this conversation. I have so many questions for you, but I'm curious to hear, maybe starting with you, Allard, in a world where technology seems to take so much from us in terms of our time, our data, our attention, how can we build technology that supports human connection and growth?
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer that kind of like from a company's perspective, like a business is trying to build technology also to make a living, because I think that's where a lot of the friction happens, right? Companies trying to make money. I feel that my belief is that the best way to do that is to find a way that your goals as a business are as tightly aligned as possible with that of your paying customers, of your users. On a very simple level, that's kind of like focusing on the task that they want to achieve, respecting their needs, as well as maximizing your company's needs within that, but not pushing over that boundary. And I think that's where the human part kind of comes in. It's like, yes, so we want you to use this tool, obviously, but you also want to use this tool because you want to get something done. So we're helping each other, right? And doing both of that. And the moment that it becomes a like, okay, we want to just like get you addicted to this tool because you being in this technology, using this technology is good for us, then we're overstepping something somewhere. And yeah, so I think that's where the boundary lies. And I think that's really difficult to manage. Like in a theoretical sense, like it sounds so easy, okay, don't step over that. But often actually having those goals aligned is quite difficult, because they might be at odds with each other by definition, and not in a in a very big sense, but just in a sense of like, well, you have a buyer, your customer, who's like trying to get your value for as cheap as possible, and you as a company are a seller who's trying to sell your value for as high as possible. So there's just, by definition, there's already a little bit of friction there. And that is something that as you grow bigger, like just becomes more and more clear. And so finding that alignment is, I think, the one of the core pieces to help build technology that supports like that humanity.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm curious, Paul, do you have anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah. I think Allard covered that really well from that a company or a business building products perspective. And I totally agree that where we see the boundaries being stepped over is when attention is the currency and attention is the sole, I suppose, the sole way to make revenue for a product, as opposed to solving a problem or a tool that helps you achieve a certain goal. And for us both, our over our careers, we've worked in tools or we've been drawn more to tools where it's solving a real problem. People are using it and loving it for reasons because it helps them achieve something or helps them get things done. And they're happy, they love using it, rather than just getting them addicted to the tool and sucking in their attention. So we've always been attracted to that side of technology and building that type of tech. But I also think just broadly, as a community of people who are building technology and using technology, we tend to forget that when certain things are used at scale, the impact that they have are very different to what we might expect, or we might not even have thought about what is it like to use technology at this kind of scale. What, as an example, if we have ride sharing services, then what happens when every single person in a city starts using a ride sharing service? Like, what kind of impact does that have on us as a community and as a society? I think when we build products, we need to be thinking about that a lot more, not just saying, here's a tool that we're building, or here's a feature that we're adding, and we want everyone to use this, but really thinking about, what does it mean if everyone was using this? Does it create net new value for all of us as a whole, or does it change our life in a way that is not great?
Yeah. I think that's such a great an important question for companies, for leaders to be asking themselves very early, sort of in the process, almost in terms of setting a vision for what is the future of the let's imagine this at scale. What impact does this have, and is this aligned, as Allard mentioned, that alignment with something that we actually stand behind? So yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And probably some of the examples that we can think of in terms of perhaps negative effects of technology is where it has started as something that's intended to just be very small scale, and it goes much bigger, and sort of the horse is bolted.
Yeah, a classic example is people sharing, these pristine, like hard to reach locations on social media, and then suddenly everyone wants to go there, and then what kind of impact is that having on that place? So there are many kind of examples of this unintended consequences that nobody really considered until it happened. I think when we build products and when we are starting out to use them, we need to really be more thoughtful of this. And the other side is, often when people are building products, we love to just look at the positives of how it can be used, of like, it's solving this problem for customers, or it changes their life in this way that's better. But almost every single product can be abused as well. Every single technology can be abused, and that's not something that we tend to think about enough when we are building them. So I think that's another area where we need to be very conscious and say, what are the ways that this can be abused? Let's invest into making sure that abuse can be prevented or it can be curtailed. Let's actually be proactive about it and invest in that, rather than just hope that everyone will have the best intentions and use it in a way that we intend them to use.
Yeah, I think that's such an important component of it. And also my former lawyer brain has to immediately think, how can we also think about co-creating guidelines or regulations? Because it's so important, I think, to articulate this and to really encourage people to look at their idea from all of the different angles, to really understand that while they might see this beautiful benefit, if in the wrong hands or with a different sort of vision applied, it could actually have very unintended, or for them, unintended consequences. So I think that's a really important component of, and almost a responsibility, I think, that that people who are creating these new forms of technology and software really need to take seriously because it can have enormous repercussions. Now, and again, skip to a question that I'm really excited to ask you about, and it's a quote from a book, Megatrends by John Naisbitt, in which he said, "The most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human." I'm really curious, Paulwyn, do you agree with that statement? And if you do, how do you think you, Medoo, can contribute to creating this future?
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Great question. It resonates so strongly with me, that statement, because I think it's closely related to what we're hoping to create with Medoo. My hope is that in this century, in this 21st century, the vast majority of people will hopefully have satisfied those basic foundational needs from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we will be working on the higher layers of self-actualization and everything associated with that. So we'll be more focused on, hopefully we would have satisfied those base layers, and then we're working towards the higher layers. And we don't even know exactly what those layers mean. It's maybe too early to even tell. But what we're hoping to do with Medoo is to bring the best of modern tech, like large language learning models, collaborative software, data analysis, to the world of personal growth and coaching, so that people have the tools available to them to then push the boundaries of that Maslow's hierarchy. We know that practitioners like coaches, therapists, people leaders, managers are doing some incredible work in this space. And we want to make sure that they have the best tools possible to help them, help them leverage technology to help people grow and achieve the things that they want to do, create the kind of life that they want for themselves. So yeah, I love that quote.
Brilliant and wonderful answer. Allard, I'm curious as to your perspective on the quote from John Naisbitt.
Yeah, so when I first read it, it kind of took me to like, oh, okay, so like what humans become cyborgs, and like we start thinking that's normal, and therefore like cyborgs are also humans, or always were. Like that's kind of where it took me initially, but I actually reading it again, I kind of want to take it like a level deeper and then bring it back to what we were talking about earlier about the concept of actually just defining technology and defining human, and basically acknowledging that those concepts are always there and always evolving. And so the way that I read it now, it's more like, well, if technology is so powerful and it becomes ever more powerful, that in itself like becomes less exciting. It's just like that's the norm. But what's actually difficult is changing how we behave around that technology and with that technology, given that we have so much power. And like a Spider-Man quote comes to mind of like, with great power comes great responsibility. And so the actual bigger change will be our acknowledgements and taking on that responsibility to behave in a particular way, because that's what humans do. And as humans, we don't go off on Twitter and like rants like crazy, which we do right now. But like hopefully over time we'll see less of that, because we know that that doesn't work, and we've learned that that doesn't work. And that's just like a simple example. I'm sure there are much more complex and interesting examples to dig into, but that's the first one that came to mind. And I think so that defining that human and actually putting more pressure on it almost, and you were talking about that responsibility of a creator of technology, and so there's also, I think, a responsibility of a user of technology, and that whole concept, and that evolving and becoming a bigger thing.
I love that. I think that's a really beautiful way of framing it, Allard, because I think it's almost like what came to mind for me was thinking of it in the context of the internet, for example, like the decisions that we make offline, as it were, as humans, about how we interact with and how we're using the tools and the intention behind it, will have a really enormous impact. And I think also what you mentioned as well, Paul, what really resonated for me is this idea that perhaps we can, with time, start to evolve past that this sort of polarizing behavior and the need to express distancing to be, misogynist behavior, for example, or racist behavior, that will start to perhaps reduce because of an evolution on the part of humans, and potentially because of technology. So it becoming something that does allow us to shift towards a deeper and more profound and more loving way of being human, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you expressed it far more eloquently than I did. Yeah.
Not at all, not at all. It's I think for me as a non-techie, it's really interesting to think about this as, you know, this as a living, breathing and evolving concept that can, and you know, I consider myself a realistic optimist. So there is definitely a part of me that's very enticed by this idea of what can we do to enable this to not be something that detracts, but that it augments and uplevels our humanity. So really loving holding this space with you guys. I'm curious, again, to sort of both of you, obviously at Human Leaders, we have 3 core pillars of human leadership, and we are very focused on sort of people-centric leading, and, you know, the evolution that we need to go through ourselves as leaders that then impacts how we lead others and how we take radical responsibility for the impact of our leadership. I'm curious, and I'll start with Paulwyn. What does human leadership mean to you, and why does it matter? If it matters to you, why?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And I love that Human Leaders is called Human Leaders. For me, I think one of the trends that we're observing is that people are losing faith in leadership. And that could be at the political level, so very high level, but also at the day-to-day level with their leadership at work, with their self-leadership. Even they're struggling to have faith in leaders, as well as struggling to lead themselves as well. I think as we have this shift towards a younger generation of people entering the workforce, the pressures on them are so different to the pressures that we faced, or the pressures that an older generation faced. So they want to have more of that personalized, personal touch with their leaders. They want to feel connected, we think, to their leaders. And brought to the context of work and the day-to-day, we think that the trend is that they want to have more personalized and more support for their own growth, and support for them to navigate the kind of pressures and challenges that they're facing, which is unprecedented compared to previous generations. And I think I keen to hear what Allard wants to touch on in this part as well. So there's when we talk about human leaders and human leadership, there's the 2 parts of leadership, which is having a vision and motivating people to work towards that vision. And quite a lot of it has kind of become extracting productivity out of your teams, we think. So the leadership has become more of that. Extract as much as you can from your people. And so we've forgotten that human part, which is so, you know, unique to each individual, leveraging their intrinsic motivators, understanding what drives them, and then finding a place for them in your team that allows them to express themselves. And thus, overall, you do have a highly productive, highly efficient team, but the way that you approach it is not a cookie cutter style thing of let's just get as much work out of people as we can, but it's a very personalized approach where you can create the space for each individual to express themselves, and also as a group be productive. I think for me, that's what human leadership is, and what human leaders is, bringing the 2 together, where, like we've talked in this half an hour already, it's not just about extracting value and productivity, it's much more than that.
I'm so glad we're recording this conversation, because you did such a fabulous job of explaining, I think, a lot of the aspects of human leadership and its potential for to really, you know, change the way we work. And like you said, it's not at the cost of productivity ever. It actually up levels it, and there's loads of data to prove that. But it's about also having space for people to be, you know, authentic, find that intrinsic motivation, express themselves, in their daily lives through work. So I love that that's exactly the kind of technology that you're developing yourselves. And I too am very curious to hear Allard's perspective on this question.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think the most important part, which Paulwyn already touched on, is really that figuring out people's intrinsic motivations and building on those to get to a larger vision. And that works like for two things. Basically, one is the original, just I guess, leadership part of like, we need to get from point A to point B, or we've decided we want to rather. So we have to have a path towards that. And the second part being the person being led, for lack of a better word, they have their own motivations and wants, and figuring out a way that those wants and needs are actually part of that larger vision, so that they both feel included, as well as the thing that they would want to do anyway actually works towards that larger vision. And so you just get a compounding effect, really, of people wanting to do what they want to do, and that building towards something that is bigger, better, stronger, faster, whatever, that everybody wants to have. And that, I think, is really the human part, is figuring out what that is and how to do that. And that is something that I think at least I'm still working on a lot, and trying to find those handles and levers on how to do that. As Paulwyn was saying, on many different levels, of like political to managerial to just myself. And I think that's the path of growth, really, like for all of us.
I think that's so beautifully put, Allard, and I think that's one of the reasons that human leaders are so excited to partner with, people and organizations like yourselves and Medoo, because there is that need, I think, to really co-create those kind of solutions, and having that shared vision of what that can look like, so that it's not either or, it's not, it really is inclusive. And as you mentioned, it's like a team can be greater than the sum of its parts, because each of those parts is acknowledged and uplifted as the individual human being that they are. And I think it's very much a kind of an and process, rather than letting go of that older model, I think, that we have historically seen of humans being expendable and exploitable, and almost seen in that kind of as human capital rather as human beings. So really beautiful answers. I think that's a really gorgeous place to leave it. We've had I'm really grateful for this conversation. I'm really grateful for the insights that you shared, and I really learned a lot, I think, in terms of clarifying my ideas around humanity and technology, and how we can use it for personal and human growth, and not just productivity. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much, Sally. We loved having this chat. Yeah,
thank you for having us on the show, and a great way to kick off the new year.